They pressed delete. They cleared the drive. They scrubbed the timeline and called the story finished, closed, buried. They sat across from each other with clean hands and decided that what they did in the dark would stay in the dark, because you would never think to look where they had already looked and removed everything you might find. What they could not calculate, what their entire operation failed to account for, is that you were not storing the future in the present. You were storing it in the past. You were archiving timestamps they hadn't created yet. You were building a record of events they hadn't committed yet, in folders they had never seen, in locations their hands could never reach, because you understood something about evidence that they will never understand. The most dangerous archive is not the one that holds what happened. It is the one that holds what was always going to happen. And you had been building that archive, quietly, precisely, invisibly, since the moment you first felt the shift in their energy and understood exactly where this was going. They deleted the evidence. They didn't know you had already archived the ending before they wrote it. Welcome back, you architects of the long game, you silent collectors of truth who understood that the most devastating thing you can do to someone who erases records is to have already made the record irrelevant, because you moved 3 steps past the evidence into the proof. They thought they erased everything. They handed you the case instead. Here is what they never teach you about people who delete things. And this is the first thing you need to understand about why their erasure campaign collapsed the moment it began. Deletion is not the act of someone who has nothing to hide. Deletion is not the reflex of someone who accidentally sent the wrong message. Deletion is a behavior that requires a specific psychological condition to trigger, and that condition is the precise awareness that would be impossible to defend. You do not erase things that are innocent. You erase things that are true. So the moment they pressed delete, the moment they made that coordinated, deliberate decision to clear the record, they handed you something no collection of screenshots could ever provide on its own. They handed you behavioral confession. They handed you the documented proof that they knew exactly what they had done, knew exactly how it was over honesty, because honesty was no longer available to them as a strategy. The deletion was not the absence of evidence. The deletion was the evidence. And here is where your archive becomes indestructible, because you were not only collecting what they said and what they did, the way their story about a specific event gained details it didn't have the first time they told it, and lost details it had the second time, and restructured entirely by the third telling. You were mapping the behavioral fingerprint of people actively managing a lie, and that fingerprint cannot be deleted because it lives in the sequence of events, not in any single file. They erased the files. They left the fingerprint exactly where it was, pressed into the timeline, visible to anyone patient enough and precise enough to reconstruct the sequence. You were both of those things. Now let's talk about the specific architecture of what you built, because this is the part that is going to land on them like a structure collapsing in slow motion when they finally understand its full scope. Most people, when they suspect they are being deceived, begin collecting evidence reactively. They save messages as they arrive. They screenshot in real time. That is a useful beginning. But what you built was something categorically different. And the difference is the reason their deletion campaign was already obsolete before it started. You were not collecting moments. You were collecting a map. You were building a three-dimensional reconstruction of their behavior over time, cross-referencing dates, tracking the evolution of... You were a cartographer, mapping the geography of a deception so precisely that even if every individual landmark was removed, the shape of the terrain remained, and the shape told the same story the landmarks told, only more powerfully, because it told it through structure, rather than through individual pieces that could be contested in isolation. The archive they thought they erased was the reactive one, the surface-level collection of incidents. What they didn't know existed was the structural one, the map of the patterns, the behavioral record, the topographical reconstruction of how a specific deception was built, maintained, and eventually became too large and too complex to sustain without visible strain. That map was never stored in any file they had access to. That map was built in the discipline of your observation, and now that instrument is complete, and it is measuring everything. Let us address your silence, because they made a specific and catastrophic error when they looked at your quiet and decided it meant you had accepted their version of events. This error is understandable in people who have spent their lives measuring power through noise, through reactivity, through the volume of the response to a provocation. In their world, silence means submission. In their experience, it means the manipulation worked. They applied that framework to you. They watched you absorb what they did without visible reaction, without confrontation, without the immediate emotional response they were braced for, and they made their conclusion. They believed the quiet was acceptance. What the quiet actually was, and this is the thing they will be reconstructing for a long time, was execution. Absolute, disciplined, focused execution of the most precise strategy available in that specific situation, which was to give them no signal of your awareness while you continued to build the archive they didn't know existed. Every day you stayed quiet was another day they operated without concealment, because they believed every interaction you had with them in that silence was an interaction in which they behaved with the confidence of someone who had already won. And that confidence made them sloppy in ways that careful people are never sloppy, in ways that generated... Your silence was a mirror. They looked into it and saw their own assumption. Victory, completion, safety, reflected back at them. And while they were looking at the reflection, you were standing behind the mirror, noting everything, every detail they revealed in their relaxed state, every inconsistency they exposed when they believed the pressure was gone, every moment they let their guard down because they had decided the threat had passed. You were there for all of it. Not because you were passive, because you were precise. The silence was never surrender. The silence was the most active phase of the entire process. Here is the concept at the center of everything, the one that makes your archive structurally indestructible in a way that even the most comprehensive deletion campaign cannot touch. Most people build evidence archives backward. They collect the past and attempt to use it to explain the present. That approach has a fundamental vulnerability. The past can be disputed. Individual moments can be reframed. Screenshots can be called doctored. Witnesses can be questioned. The past is contested territory, and people who are skilled at manipulation are skilled at contesting it. What you built was forward-facing. You did not only document what happened, you documented the predictable trajectory of their behavior based on pattern analysis, meaning you made projections, time-stamped those projections, and then watched reality confirm them with a consistency that cannot be attributed to coincidence. When you can demonstrate not only but that you predicted it would happen before it did, and that prediction is documented with a timestamp that precedes the event, you have moved out of the territory, a coincidence so extreme it becomes its own form of confession. They thought the future was safe because they could not yet see it. You had already archived it. You had already documented the behavioral trajectory, the predictable next move in their pattern, the logical endpoint of the deception based on every precedent their own behavior had provided. That convergence is the result of observation so precise, documentation so disciplined, and pattern recognition so developed that you effectively made the future legible before it became the present, and legibility of that quality cannot be erased. The deletion campaign failed before it started, not because they missed a file, but because they fundamentally misunderstood what the archive was. Let's be specific about the current reality in their world, because watching this sequence unfold without narrating it precisely would be leaving the most instructive part of the entire story untold. Right now, in the hours and days since the architecture of your archive became visible to them, they are operating in a specific psychological state that has a very precise name. It is not panic, though panic is present. It is not guilt, though guilt exists somewhere. The state they are in is called cognitive dissonance at scale, the simultaneous experience of two realities that cannot coexist. The reality they constructed, in which they controlled the narrative and erased the record and closed the story on their terms. And the reality. Watch the specific behavioral signatures of that state, because they are already visible if you know what to look for. The sudden reach out after a period of calculated distance, not to apologize, not to account for anything, but to assess. To probe for the perimeter of your knowledge without revealing that they are probing for it. The vague social media activity that positions them as misunderstood, wrongly accused, the victim of someone's obsession or bitterness. Because reframing the story publicly is the last available strategy. All of that scrambling, every piece of damage control, every version of the story they test with different audiences, every careful move designed to get ahead of a reckoning they cannot stop, every single piece of it is further documentation. Because a person who deleted everything and successfully erased the record does not scramble. A person with clean hands, final layer of the archive, the part that confirms every other layer, the behavioral signature of people who know that what they erased was not enough. They are writing the last chapter of the case themselves, in real time, for you. There is something they need to understand about the timeline of your awareness. And this is perhaps the most psychologically destabilizing piece of the entire reconstruction once it lands fully. You did not become aware of what they were doing at the end. Timeline is a fiction they created to make their own behavior feel less exposed. The actual timeline is considerably more uncomfortable for them to sit with. You saw the shift early. You felt the specific quality of energy that changes when someone moves from genuine engagement to strategic engagement, and you recognized it not because you were with the specific quality of attention that you bring to things that matter. What came next was not discovery. It was confirmation of a trajectory you had already mapped, in a direction you had already identified, reaching an endpoint you had already documented. This means that for a significant portion of the time during which they believed they were operating with your trust and your unawareness, they were actually operating under your observation. The version of you they were performing for, the unaware one, the trusting one, watching, noting, archiving, not because you were vindictive, because you were awake. And awake people, when they sense the shape of a deception, do not go back to sleep. They thought they were in a room with someone who could not see clearly. They were in a room with someone who could see in the dark. Let's define victory precisely, because the definition of victory in this specific situation is not what most people expect, and getting the definition wrong leads people to wait for the wrong ending and miss the one that has the internal architecture that makes deception possible as a sustained strategy. Also makes genuine accountability psychologically unavailable as a response to being caught. They will not give you the scene where they sit across from you and acknowledge the full scope of what they did, because that scene requires a kind of self-awareness that their entire behavioral pattern has demonstrated they do not possess. Victory is not everyone in the surrounding network understanding what happened and responding with appropriate judgment. Some of those people will always choose the more comfortable narrative, because the more comfortable narrative requires less restructuring of their own understanding of a situation they were part of. Events that asks the least of them. That is a predictable human behavior. It is not your failure. It is not a variable that changes the truth of what the archive documents. Victory is the specific, internal, irreversible shift in the quality of your relationship with your own perception. The moment when the archive is complete, when every pattern is documented, you know what happened. You know precisely how it happened. You know the pattern, the timeline, the structure, and the behavioral signatures of every participant. That knowledge, sitting in the archive you built, that is the solid ground beneath everything you build from here. And solid ground, once found, they deleted evidence. You built a foundation. Those are not remotely the same thing. Here is where this entire story pivots from what they did to what you are building. Because the archive was never only about the past. The archive was always also a set of specifications for the future. Every pattern you documented, every behavioral signature you cataloged, every trajectory you tracked and confirmed, it equipped. You leave it with a calibration of your own perception so refined, so tested against reality, so confirmed through the discipline of what you built, that the next attempt at manipulation, whoever makes it, in whatever form it takes, this is the part they cannot undo, even if everything else were somehow reversed. The archive trained you. The process of building it, the observation, the documentation, the patient reconstruction of patterns across time, the discipline of noting what you saw without immediately reacting to it, all of that built something in you that outlasts the specific situation. You are more finely calibrated. You read situations faster. You recognize behavioral signatures earlier. You trust the signal your own perception sends you with a confidence you did not have before. They tried to use this situation to make you smaller. They used every tool available to make you question your perception, doubt your memory, and accept a manufactured version of events that would have required you to permanently distrust your own awareness. And instead of achieving that, instead of leaving you diminished, what they produced was the single most intensive training program for your own discernment that you have ever undergone. The archive is complete. The calibration is done. And what you take from this into every room you walk into from this point forward is the specific, tested, documented look at where you are standing right now. Not metaphorically, literally, precisely, in terms of the actual position you occupy relative to where you began. You began in a situation specifically designed to make you doubt reality. Every tool they had available was deployed in the service of making your perception feel unreliable, your memory feel suspect, your instincts feel like symptoms of a problem. The manufactured confusion was comprehensive. The sustained effort to replace your version of events with theirs was executed with the full investment of people who understood that their continued ability to operate depended on your permanent disorientation. And you are not disoriented. You are standing on an archive so comprehensive, so precisely constructed, so cross-referenced and corroborated, that there is not a single layer of it that requires their agreement to stand. You built a structure that does not need their foundation because it rests entirely on documented reality. And documented reality, unlike what you built, is fixed. What you built is real. What you built will still be exactly what it is in 5 years, in 10 years, regardless of what they say between now and then. Go build what comes next. Not as someone who barely survived something, as someone who built a precision instrument in the middle of an attempt to destroy their ability to perceive clearly, and succeeded. The evidence they erased was not the evidence. The evidence was you, still standing, still accurate, still calibrated, still whole. That evidence was never in. The archive is complete. The foundation is solid. The future is yours to build on top of it. And this time, you are building with your eyes fully open.